Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president, and this is a post-debate commentary supplemental. Uh, Last night when I was coming back from the New Jersey Libertarian Party convention, I was driving and I made a post-debate commentary as I was coming home in my automobile. And so I posted that this morning. And in that commentary, I highlighted the fact that Josh Smith, one of the contenders for the nomination, had announced there at that convention that he now favors the immediate repeal of Social Security, which of course is the position that I have taken during this entire campaign and, well, for more than 30 years. Well, Josh took me to task on Twitter by saying that I incorrectly suggested that he had favored the continuation of Social Security prior to the New Jersey debate. And so let me put things in context. The whole controversy goes back to the South Carolina Libertarian Party debate. And you can watch that debate. I encourage you to do so. It's on my website at jacobforliberty.com. And in that debate, I called for the immediate repeal of Social Security, along with Medicare and all other socialist welfare state programs. And just to put things in an overall context, in this campaign, it has been my conviction that if this party is going to lead America to freedom, and I believe that's our job in this party, to lead this country to freedom, we've got to get our internal house in order. And we've got to reject any positions that we've taken for the last 20 years or the last 20 minutes that violate our principles. Because why would anybody want to vote for a party that violates its own principles? And the core principle of our philosophy is the non-aggression principle. It says that it is wrong to initiate force against another person. And this principle is so important that we've even enshrined it into a pledge that everybody's required to sign as a condition of joining the party, where we essentially vow to never support the initiation of force. Well, for the last 20 years, that's exactly what the Libertarian Party's been doing, and especially in our Libertarian Party presidential campaigns. And the perfect example of that is Social Security, along with Medicare and other examples. There's several examples here. But Social Security is the crown jewel of American socialism. It is been so ingrained in our lives. We've all been born and raised under this socialist program, and it is a socialist program. I mean, they don't call it Social Security for nothing. It came from German socialists, the concept. It was imported into the United States. America lived without this socialist program for more than 100 years. But it's been a permanent part for, well, all our lives, at the very least. It came into existence in the 1930s under the presidential regime of Franklin Roosevelt, and without any constitutional authority at all. So my position is that if we're going to lead America to freedom, we can't be advocating policies and positions that violate our core principles, because why would anybody vote for a party that advocates positions that violate its own core principle? So that's the overall context of what what I'm advocating here. Let's get our internal house in order and then run a campaign. And I contend that once we do that, the votes for this message will skyrocket, okay? Because nobody is going to vote for a reform-oriented message from a party that says that it's for liberty. That is a message that purports to reform the welfare-warfare state rather than dismantle it. In other words, freedom entails a dismantling of infringements on freedom, not their reform. If all we do is reform infringements on freedom, we haven't achieved freedom, any more than reform of slavery would have meant freedom for slaves. To achieve freedom, you've got to dismantle slavery. To achieve freedom in our time, you got to dismantle the structure of serfdom. Well, all of my opponents went ballistic there at the South Carolina Libertarian Party debate, except Josh. Okay, so they just vociferously objected to this, which is not surprising because this is what's been going on in the party for at least 20 years, the support of these socialist programs. They're just flowing with the tide that's been flowing for 20 years or more. And they made certain objections, like they said, I lack compassion. Well, that's a ludicrous objection, but it shows you what socialism does to people, including libertarians. It causes them to convince themselves that they're really showing compassion by supporting the continuation of a socialist program that involves the initiation of force, taxation, through the coercive apparatus of the Internal Revenue Service, which is one of the most tyrannical agencies in history. That's not compassion. I mean, you're being good with money that's being stolen by the IRS. There's no compassion there. Compassion comes from the willing heart of the individual. And we've got to convey the conviction that freedom works. Freedom brings out the best in mankind. So the second objection was among my opponents there at that debate is, well, people would die in the streets, without Social Security and Medicare and so forth. And this, again, is ludicrous. I mean, like I said, America lived for more than 100 years without Social Security and Medicare, and there were not people dying in the streets as a result. In fact, is on the contrary. America had the most prosperous society in history, like in the late 1800s, or early 1900s. And there was the greatest outburst of voluntary charity that mankind had ever seen. But the idea was children and grandchildren honor mother and father and grandparents on a voluntary basis. They help them out. Now, there was no income tax. There was no FICA taxes. So people were able to save a greater portion of their income. They were able to help out their families. But then there's church groups that are filled with faith-filled people, and there's neighborhood groups and charitable foundations. And it is my conviction that this party needs to lead America to the restoration of faith and belief in freedom, as well as the principles of voluntary charity. So in the midst of this debate, Josh said, I want to reinforce what Jacob said, and he pointed out that if people are permitted to opt out, because this was one of the measures that one of my opponents was calling for, that he says, young people should be able to opt out whenever they want. And but it's not really that clear cut, because under these opt-out plans, what they really mean is that they can get opt-out of the socialist system, but then they're required by the government to set aside part of their income in savings in government-approved retirement accounts. So it's really a fascist system that's being endorsed here when you hear that term opt-out. But Josh correctly pointed out that if you let these people opt out completely from the socialist system, that there's not going to be enough money to pay for the Social Security recipients, the current generation of Social Security recipients. So what would end up happening is the young people who are opting out would be required to set aside their money in a retirement account, but also pay FICA taxes to continue funding the Social Security recipients. Josh also pointed out that Social Security was a Ponzi scheme. Now, I construed Josh's remarks to reinforce my critique of socialism, but I did not interpret his remarks to call for a repeal, an immediate repeal of this government program, which is what I stand for. I didn't hear that coming out. I thought that he was just criticizing the system, which a lot of people do. I mean, there's people that criticize the system. They'll say it's a bad system, it's an evil system, whatever, but not call for the immediate repeal of it. They say, well, we need an off-ramp. That's what they said at the South Carolina debate. We need an off-ramp, which means continuing this program for a certain period of time, and the consensus was for at least one generation, which is 25 years. Okay, and of course, what's going to happen 25 years from now? Well, the 40-year-olds of today who are going to be 65 are going to say, wait a minute, we put it in and we got a right to take it out. And that's the other thing they were saying there in this debate, that people put their money in, they have a right to get it back. Well, this has never been a retirement fund. Never. It's always been just a straight socialist welfare state program. No different from any other welfare state program. And that's the way it was set up. Now, people pay FICA taxes and income taxes and so forth, but there's no connection in terms of that you're putting money into a retirement account. They spend all those taxes as soon as they receive them. What they call these taxes is irrelevant. They all just go in and they're spent. So Social Security is really just a stealing program. It's based on stealing from the young people, the productive people, to give the loot to the seniors. And it's done under this aura of care and compassion, which, as I've said, is not care and compassion at all. So Josh affirmed that today and on Twitter that what he actually meant was not just a critique of Social Security, but that he actually believed that it should be immediately repealed, just what I was saying. So I totally misconstrued his remarks in my commentary last night because I believed that he was just criticizing the system in South Carolina. I didn't construe his remarks to call for an immediate repeal of the program, and that's what he says he meant when he said he was reinforcing my remarks. And so, Josh, I apologize to you. I obviously misconstrued your remarks, but the good news is that we've been on the same page on this the whole time, and I didn't realize that. I thought I was the only one calling for the repeal, the immediate repeal of this socialist program. And I can only assume that you feel the same way about Medicare, about just immediately repealing Medicare. Medicaid destroyed the finest healthcare system in history. And, you know, we've all been born and raised under Social Security, but some of us were born and raised before Medicare was adopted. And it was the finest healthcare system in history. And doctors helped poor people that couldn't afford to pay. It was all on a voluntary basis. You know, I've often said that I grew up in Laredo, Texas, which is the poorest city in the United States. And doctors' offices were filled every day with people that they knew couldn't pay. Half of them couldn't pay. They never turned away anybody. And the same with we had one hospital in town, Mercy Hospital, a Catholic hospital. It relied on donations. And it worked. I mean, doctors just did it because they felt it was their ethical duty to help people in need. And doctors, notwithstanding that, were like the second wealthiest people in town, second only to the oil people, because they were making money from the people who were paying, and they were just paying back. And it's that type of system that we need to restore. Okay? Because if you look at like what happened in our nation, it's very similar to what has happened in our party, the Libertarian Party. I mean, there were some bad founding principles of our nation, like slavery, for example, big violation of liberty. But there were some good founding principles, like no Social Security, no Medicare, no income tax, no IRS, no immigration controls, no drug war, gun control, national security state, foreign wars, foreign aid, foreign interventions. It was a remarkable system. And Americans abandoned that. They rejected those sound founding principles for the welfare warfare state, and the results have been disastrous. I mean, Social Security has created this mindset of hopeless dependency of, oh, we couldn't survive without it. You know, it's like a narcotic. And essentially, this is what's happened to the Libertarian Party. And we start out with this sound package of principles, including the immediate repeal of Social Security and Medicare, the end of all immigration controls and trade restrictions, open borders, which is as I've repeatedly emphasized in this race, is the only solution to this immigration morass, the death, suffering, kidnappings, rapes, and massive police state along the border. They are the cause. Their system is the cause of the crisis that they lament. And that our heritage of open borders is the only solution to it. So, in any event, we need to restore the sound founding principles of our party, which calls for a total rejection of socialism. If we continue running presidential campaigns that call for Social Security, Medicare, border controls, school vouchers, and taking control over the government schools, and FDA reform, and reform of this and reform of that, we're not leading America to freedom. To lead America to freedom, we've got to make the case for freedom, and that means restoring the genuine principles of this party. So, in essence, Josh, I want to apologize to you for misconstruing your remarks. The good news is that you and I are the two candidates at this point that are calling for the immediate repeal of this particular socialist program, and let's work together and see if we can get this whole party to shift in the direction of principle in order to lead America to freedom. I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president. My campaign website is jacobforliberty.com.